Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. My guest today is a presentation skills specialist. She's worked with clients nationally and internationally since setting up her business in 2019. That's a good year to think of setting up your business. And she was a member of Toastmasters International for 11 years and is a member of the Professional Speaking Association. I'm delighted to welcome Maureen McCowen to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Maureen.
Hi, Alec. How are you?
Now, for those who follow the show, we had you before, and it was on the 1st of July, 2022. So that's some time ago. But really, what I want to do is I want to share the sort of knowledge, skills, and what you had to do to set up a business. And your timing probably wasn't the best in the world, if the truth be known. But anyway, that's its own challenges. So let's just pick up the story where as I understand it, you kind of fell into setting up your own business. It wasn't quite what you'd planned.
Definitely wasn't what I planned. No, so my background is teaching. I was a secondary school teacher for many, many years, teaching Irish and French. And I decided to take a career break from that and do something different. And the something different, long story short, ended up training to be a trainer with a view at that stage that I would deliver training on behalf of some of the larger companies, be an associate with them, and that would keep me going and see how things went. But I hadn't figured on not even having a conversation with anybody. Any of them that I contacted, they weren't interested in talking to me. So the next stage was, well, I wonder, can I do this myself? So I decided in November of 2018, I was after getting the qualification for train the trainer. I was like, okay, let's see if this will work. So that's what I did. I made the inquiries, set up the business. Ignorance is bliss, and set up the business in February, start February of 2019.
Brilliant timing. Brilliant timing. In terms of just talk about the perception was that, okay, if I have this sort of skill set, train the trainer, that there will be organizations that just are looking for people just like me. So I presume that is the first presumption that was incorrect.
That was the first presumption that was incorrect. And one company actually that did at least reply to me said that I needed to have had 10 years experience before they would consider taking me on. I'm like, okay, I don't have 10 years experience in corporate training. I had a lifetime of experience teaching, but that was going to be a different situation. So look, at all these things work out for the best in the end. And, you know, setting up a business is something that I had never imagined that I'd do. That's what I've ended up doing, and I love it. And I can't imagine doing anything else now.
There we go. I mean, the setting up a business is always going to be a rocky road. Tell our audience out there, because there will be people who have thought about setting up their own business and have been put off by many of the hurdles that they have to jump over. Talk about where you sort of took it from the start and how that worked out for you.
So my taking from the start was Googling how to be successful in business, literally, because when I say I didn't have business background, my parents had one of those small corner shops, the village shop, when I was growing up, and it was, you know, where people would come in, they would ask for whatever item they wanted, and you had to serve them, get the item for the counter. There was no self-service shops at that stage. So I would have been brought up in that type of an environment, but the type of business that I was setting up, I had no experience in that. I had no connections or background in anything like that. And like I said, you know, ignorance is bliss. I had no idea of the amount of work and the different roles that you'd have to do and the whole roller coaster effect that's there when it comes to a business. And probably just as well I didn't know, because I genuinely, I was thinking about this recently, I don't think I would have done it. I think I would have sat back and thought, I'm not going to be able for this. I'm not doing it. So, you know, it just shows the limitations we can put on ourselves as well. So probably just as well I didn't know what was ahead.
It's quite interesting that, and I found it as a sort of business consultant, that a lot of people have skill sets. But whether you go through the whole formal thing of college or whether you serve your time in a trade, the one thing they don't teach you is how to run a business. They'll teach you all the other skills, but not how to run a business. So you have to go rummaging. What was your first port of call? Did you go to a local enterprise office or something like that?
Yeah, so I went to the local enterprise office without really having a fully formed idea, just to test it out, see if this is something, where do I start? Where do I get some information? And the Start Your Own Business course then was my starting point from that. So apart from Googling about how to be successful in business, I was Googling about networking. So I had started networking very early on, but the Start Your Own Business course that I did highlighted all the different areas that I needed to work on and highlighted the lack of knowledge that I had on everything, but was full of enthusiasm at that stage, and plenty of time for doing courses because I didn't have clients. So
Yes.
it was networking, and it was learning how to do my business bookkeeping and how to set up my website. I built my first website myself after a Start Your Own Business, or after the local enterprise course. So it was, yep, it was getting stuck into doing all of those type of things that you had to
So,
do at the beginning.
yeah, so you're going to bootstrap your business. I mean, the vision for yourself, was this going to be that, okay, I'm going to get involved in the whole presentation skills side of the business, and I'm going to be calling on companies and in their offices, teaching them how to do various things.
I didn't really know where it was going to end up. And it was, I knew that there was a need for what I do, because I'd been a member of Toastmasters and a mentor in Toastmasters for many years. I had seen people coming in that into the joining Toastmasters who were struggling because they were delivering presentations at work and that they needed support with that. So I knew from that side of it that there was a market for what I was doing, but I wasn't really sure what way it was going to pan out, and I was okay with that as well. I'm the type of person who has always, I like to have a plan. Everything is always laid out and a plan. But when I applied for that career break from teaching, I had no plan, and it was like, this will work out, something will fall into place, and it did. And it was pretty much the same with regard to the business. I thought, I don't know what way this is going to go. I'm not the expert in this because I don't have that experience yet. So let's just see where things go and if there's a demand. And that was sort of the way that it has evolved over the years
Right.
from that.
Well, I think it's fairly common for a lot of business owners just to throw themselves in at the deep end and
Mhm.
see how they're going to swim. I suppose one of the challenges coming out of teaching, I would have thought, is you're familiar with teaching children. Now you're teaching big children,
Mm.
and the style that you're going to have to change in some way to meet their needs. That must have been an interesting one for you.
It was, but I, again, from the train the trainer course, that professional practice cert that I did, and there was a lot about, you know, adult education, teaching adults and adult style of learning and so on. And some of it was different, but I would have done it years ago when I was training to get my higher diploma as a teacher. I would have done that. So I was familiar with that side of things. And really, you know, learning styles are going to be the same regardless of the age of the person that's there. Keeping people's interest is going to be the same regardless of the age of what's there. And it's just, you know, a few tweaks that were needed. But beyond that, there are far more similarities than what there are differences. And a big part of it is being able to adapt to changes that are there, to be able to change your style, and to be able to recognize if you need to explain something again if it hasn't fully landed the first time around. So yeah, it's very similar really in an awful lot of ways.
Yeah, I suppose that must have been quite interesting to watch the differences in the type of audience that you were dealing with. But also you had the sort of confidence to stand up in front of a group of people. I mean, children are a tough audience at the best of times. So to be able to stand up in front of them, and then also, of course, you've taken on Toastmasters, which is to kind of reinforce that skill of being able to stand up and communicate in.
Mhm. Yeah,
How do the two of those
absolutely.
marry?
Well, I suppose from the standing up in front of a group of teenagers, yeah, they're a tough, they can be a tough audience, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a confident speaker because you're able to do that in front of a group of teenagers, where you're going in and you're delivering your expertise, sharing your expertise to captive audience who might not always want to be there. One of my subjects was Irish, and teaching Irish in an all boys school, you most definitely had a group of students who did not always want to be there. So but you it's not necessarily, yes, you have to have clear communication and you have to deliver your message. You have to have that class planned so that in your 40-minute section that you've got your clear intro and then the body of it, and that you've got your summary at the end of it and so on. But there an awful lot of the skills that make you a confident speaker don't necessarily come to teachers. So that's one of the areas that people need to work on quite often as well. From Toastmasters, I suppose what I would have learned there were different skills. My reason for joining Toastmasters had nothing to do with speeches and or public speaking as such. I wanted to do something for myself as a personal development type of thing. And an area that I wasn't good at was the whole social chit chat. So I decided that that's what I wanted to develop. And that's how I ended up joining Toastmasters. I got a lot more out of it than I had expected to, but that was my reason for starting it. And of course, that social chit chat is essential in business when you're talking, networking events and so on.
Yes, of course.
It all fits in as well now.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Maureen McCowen. And we're just talking about, from your teaching audience, that was a captive audience. Now you're going to be getting to a paid audience who will be a bit more discerning about where their money goes. So that must have been an interesting challenge.
It's interesting. You also have the opportunity of finding out what exactly they want to get from the session with you. You can be sure that you're tailoring what they want from the content that you have, and they're interested, that they're invested in it. If it's their time that they're investing, if it's financially that they're investing, they want to develop and they want to get something out of it. And that's core, because once that interest is there and people are willing to make changes, then that makes a huge difference. I mean, I was finishing off coaching sessions with a client there last week, and the difference that was there in just a few short sessions on how, when she first came to me, one of the issues she had was about how nervous she was about presentations. And the other day we were dealing with a different topic, and she said, the presentation, oh no, that's fine, I've got no worries about that. And it's like, just hold on one moment, listen to what you're just saying here. It's that it almost had crept up unawares on her that suddenly I've no problem about doing the presentations now. I'm moving on to the next element of communication. So it's interesting how that development takes place, but that's because people are prepared to put in the work.
Yes, and there is work involved. I mean, you and I have seen far too often, unfortunately, death by PowerPoint, or people using PowerPoint as a crutch to make up for being ill prepared. Can you just talk about that and your thoughts around it all?
Yeah, when I'm working with clients, it's always is PowerPoint needed at all, first and foremost, because it's not always. It's almost the default for so many people, that I'm doing a presentation, so I have to have a PowerPoint, and they crack open the laptop and power up PowerPoint and get started there. Whereas if they switch the focus around and think about, well, who's going to be listening to this and how am I going to deliver my message? And is PowerPoint going to add value to it? Is it going to help them better understand or better remember what's being said? And if not, it's not needed. And that freedom that's there of thinking, well, I don't actually have to have PowerPoint. For example, if you're telling a story, how's PowerPoint going to add value there? It's a distraction, because it doesn't matter, even if it's just an image that's on the screen, it's a distraction from your story. It's a distraction from connecting with the audience. So it's always thinking about, is it going to add benefit and is it going to add value? And if the purpose of it is for notes for the speaker or as a crutch for the speaker, well, then find a different way to have that crutch, but don't use PowerPoint for it.
Yeah, and I'd like to just to kind of focus on this, but I MC events and things like this, and I'm so well versed in seeing people arrive up. It's quite obvious they haven't prepared, and then they have that 20-slide PowerPoint which they read back to the audience. And just talk about how badly that works with an audience, because I don't think a lot of people understand, that they're doing themselves no service whatsoever in that sort of approach.
Absolutely. Well, there was a client I was working with recently who was very reluctant to let go of all of that text on the slide. And his reason for it was he said he wanted to show his expertise by having all of his information on the slide. And my argument there was, if you just have your key points, or you've got an image that you're speaking around, you're talking about it, you're sharing your expertise that way. Whereas the slide, I could read it. I don't know your industry, but I can read it and I can deliver it, but I've got no expertise in it. So you're doing yourself a lot of harm by putting up the content, apart from the fact that that slide appears up. Naturally, the audience is going to skim through that slide. They will have it read so much faster than what you're going to be able to speak through it. So what are they doing then while you're speaking? They're switched off. They've taken out their phone. They're switched off because, you know, they've already got the bones of what you're talking about from the content that's on your slide. So many reasons not to overuse it.
And they've got their interpretation of what they think you're saying, as opposed to you listening to what you actually have to say about it.
Yeah, you know, and it's just, it can be reduced so easily. And ironically, when people do cut back that content that's on the slides, it helps build their confidence, because they know they can talk around the topic, that they don't have to be a slave to the slides, that they have to say every word that they, you know, one of the reasons that people find that they're nervous is, what if I lose my place in the slide? Well, if you don't have a lot of content up there, you're not going to lose your place, because there's nowhere to hide.
And equally, there's one important thing from professional speaking, which I remember, is your audience actually don't know what you're going to say. So if you leave out a small piece or you trip up somewhere, they don't know.
They don't know. No. And, you know, once you've got your main points covered, well, then that's okay. It doesn't matter if you leave something out, because they're, like you said, they're not going to know. They won't know. They won't be any wiser.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Maureen McCowen. And we're just talking about the whole area of presentation skills. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute, Maureen, if you don't mind, because I just was thinking to myself, COVID. 6 months before COVID, where you're going to be in front of an audience, and now suddenly you find yourself that your audiences are banned from meeting in public. How did you face that challenge? That must have been an interesting one for you.
It was. And like I said, I had set up the business in February of 2019, and that was from zero. That was starting at a place where I didn't have any business connections or anything like that. Sometimes people would set up, but they've built up their networks beforehand, and you know, when they launch their business, they have a client base already there. I didn't have any of that. So it was my first big gig, if you like. Delivering my first company training was going to be on the 1st and 2nd, I think it was, of April of 2020. And I was so excited about that. And of course, the whole world had closed down by then, and it didn't happen. And like everybody, you know, was like, what are we going to do? What's going to happen here? And very quickly, everybody moved online, and the same as everybody else, I was able to join on, you know, do my training online, deliver my training online, suddenly open up to a much wider audience. And at one stage, it was a case of, you know, training coaches how to deliver presentations online, because I don't know if you attended one of the millions of webinars that popped up left, right, and center. But some of them were really, really bad, because exactly what we're talking about, it was taking those really dense slides and transferring them onto a screen. And it was even worse. It's even harder to keep your attention when it's online rather than in person. So yeah, it was atrocious for some of them that were there. So that was part of what I was doing as well at the beginning, was training people. And I found that the skills that I had from teaching, that flexibility, that adaptability that I had from teaching, was very useful for me. And some of the online engagement tools, I already had my account set up from 5-6 years before that, from doing online stuff with students in class, because it was language learning. There was a lot of interaction when we could get a chance to get to the computer room. So I had all of those accounts. Might not have been very proficient in them, but nobody was at the time. But,
no, of course
you know,
not.
at the start of COVID, everybody was learning. So yeah, it actually, and since then, you know, I've got, even still, the vast majority of my work is still online.
And there we go. And really what you learned was one of the key drivers of an SME business owner: resilience, adapt or die sort of thing, you know.
Adapt or die. Although I have to say, I'd rather that word adapt than pivot. That pivot word made me just cringe. It was the key word that was being thrown out all the time.
Oh, of course, everything. Well, then of course you have transformation, and there's these sort of keywords that just keep bouncing in.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, which must have been quite interesting, and again, you were able to take people on the right journey. The number of people working from home, as so many of us do, wouldn't even invest in a simple green screen or some background. So we were kind of peering into people's private homes and bedrooms and all sorts of things, and seeing things probably we shouldn't be seeing either. So there must have been a challenge around that for your audiences.
Yes, and I suppose, especially in the early days of COVID, everybody was muddling through as best they could. So there was a lot of flexibility, I think, and that whole idea of it not being professional looking, there was a bit of flexibility at the beginning. And then as time went on, then, people needed to, sort themselves out with regard to the background, or even, the camera angles. How many times were we peering up people's nostrils, and all sorts of things that were going on at that stage as well. But it's interesting because I am finding from quite a few clients that are coming to me now that they have much higher levels of anxiety going back, delivering presentations in person since COVID. And that whole idea of not having the security of whether it's having their notes on the screen in front of them or the posted notes on the laptop to remind them of what they wanted to say, but that anxiety level has increased for a lot of people that are coming to me at the moment.
It's interesting. What's happened is we've kind of got a 360 cycle that's happened here. Maybe just talk a bit more about that. Perhaps you might share a couple of key pointers for people if they're suffering from anxiety. Naturally enough, you will give us your details before you finish the show, but maybe a couple of pointers that might steer people in the right direction, or to be thinking differently about going back into that sort of live audience situation.
Yeah, I think one of the key tips for this one would be, because the fear is that people are judging, people are looking at them and people are judging at them. And there's a quote that is saying they're not judging you, but they're judging the value of what you bring. And I think if you have that audience focus from the beginning, so you're thinking, how can I bring value? So it's whether it's in a comment that I'm making at a meeting, or if it's in a presentation that I'm delivering, how is this going to add value to people? And having that audience focused rather than on yourself, is key. And anybody who knows me, who works with me, everything I talk about has got to do with preparation. So it is in that preparation, and it's thinking it through beforehand, as in, what are you going to be saying? What's the core message that you want to deliver? How are you going to deliver it in a way that's going to create most impact and be most memorable to that audience that's there in front of you? And that preparation is going to be a fundamental part of helping to deal with that anxiety and those nerves. And yes, there are the tips and techniques for, whether it's breathing or visualization and all of those types of tips to deal with nerves. But I believe that if you don't have your prep done beforehand and you're not confident going in with what you've got to deliver, then the rest of it isn't going to work. You really need to have that substance to what you're speaking about.
So are you suggesting that you can't wing it?
It's interesting to define wing it, because if you're talking about winging it, going in and delivering your presentation with zero preparation at all, then I would say very, very few people can do that successfully. But preparation doesn't mean you have to have it scripted. It might be that it could be as you're driving along, that you're planning out what you're going to say, what your message is. It doesn't have to be scripted. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but that at least you know where you're going with it.
Exactly. And in terms of content, the content is one side of it, and sort of in the 2.5 minutes we've left, that's how quickly this all goes. Let's just talk about, there are other techniques that you need to understand about how to stand up in front of an audience, how to breathe. I presume these are all techniques you talk to people about.
Yes, and then there's that idea of delivering with high energy if it's online, as well as, because a lot of businesses are still delivering their presentations online. So it's making sure that you've got that as well as the in-person. So those type of techniques, yes, I can work with people from all of that. It's keeping this simple. Normally, if I'm going into a company and I'm doing the needs analysis beforehand with the participants, and what do they want to get from the course, and it's always the same thing, you know, tips and techniques to improve my public speaking and how to deal with the nerves. That's what comes up the vast majority of the time. It's the basics that a lot of people need, and sometimes it's just that refresher and a reminder of the basics. Hearing somebody saying it in a different way, that can be
Yes, of course, and it makes a difference. And as you said, it's not about you; it's about your audience and what they're going to get. And also, I think we're well familiar, you and I, just from professional speaking, how often speakers get up there and give out too many things for people to try and remember to take away with them.
Yes, yeah, it's keeping it down to, you know, the less is more is what's there. And it's back again to people feeling that they need to give all the information to show their expertise in it. Whereas something that's small and tangible and actionable is going to have much more impact. And if people want to find out more, they can always ask questions.
They can. And in the sort of 35, 40, 50 seconds that we've left, and that's how quickly this goes when you've got a topic of interest, tell people where they can find out more about you and etc.
Yeah. So I'm active on social media. My preferred platform is LinkedIn. So Maureen McCowen on LinkedIn, and my website is softskillsuccess.ie.
Softskillsuccess.ie. My goodness, all the S's there, assassination. You have me nearly spitting on myself there with that one, but that's fantastic. What a great way to finish the show. A special thanks to our guest today, Maureen McCowen, for coming into the You and Your Business studio. Thanks also to Stephen on sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1 o'clock, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.